Good evening, everyone. It is now 7 o'clock on June 28th, and I call the June 28th, 2023 Board of Health meeting to order.
Before you dive in, Dan, I just want to call attention. It looks like we don't have Brenda.
I would agree.
Therefore, Gino is on minutes, correct?
You looking for my minutes? I don't have any minutes.
Gino, I believe you are currently clerk. Brenda is not here at the moment. While I know she sometimes utilizes the LCTV recording to generate minutes.
I understand
just in case she is.
I understand that, but she then sent me that. She not send it to me.
All right, Mr. Davis, are you able to take notes for us as well, just in case?
I will take copious notes and email them to Brenda.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Wason, for pointing that out. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. I'm also glancing at the attendee list. We do have looks like a phone in the audience, but I did not see. We'll see if that is our 7 p.m. hearing. So I'm going to start with our 7 p.m. public hearing for 37 Dogwood Road for a housing order extension request. I believe there was another request, but it wasn't on the agenda. I did not see full paperwork for that second piece, but we will see if the participant, I have a hand raised. So I'm going to promote our attendee to the audience so they can share with us.
Stupid, that doesn't work. That's why I can't get in.
All right. So we're opening up our public hearing for 37 Dogwood. We currently have, here we go, a Galaxy S22 as our guest. If you could please share your name and address and why you're here.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm computer illiterate, and I apologize for my lack of same even after all these years of COVID Zooming, but Cheryl Gould, I am representing the owner of 37 Dogwood, and I'm here for your 7 o'clock hearing.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Gareffi, if you wouldn't mind, I know you've been working on this for a bit now. We've seen most of the communications, but if you wouldn't mind at least starting with a bit of discussion of how things started, where we are, what actions have been taken from both the petitioner as well as from your office, and we can see where we are.
Sure. So the most recent document I put together was after a reinspection of the property last week. So in early May, the occupant came into the town hall with some concerns about the unit that she's living in and requesting a housing inspection. The inspection was done on May 4th, issued an order for the violations that were noted on there, that inspection to be corrected. The order essentially states the timeframes in general and the time they need to be corrected. There was a request, as with every order that a board issues, the person that the order is issued on has the right to a hearing before the Board of Health to discuss the order, and boards can either rescind, modify, or sustain the order. Generally, when somebody requests a hearing in a case for the housing, it's generally they need an extension of time to do some work in the house. Again, that's been my general experience with those. I did do a reinspection on June 6th, on June 22nd, found that only a couple of the items have been addressed. The 24-hour item, which is the smoke detectors, have been done, and some pest control work looks like it's been done. The code gives property owners generally 30 days to correct most of the items, with the exception of those things that are considered life safety matters, things like smoke detectors and egress kind of issues. So the life safety has been addressed. There are lots of construction type issues that were noted during the inspection. Those really haven't been addressed, and we're now a couple of months out from the date of the inspection. So again, when folks come for the request of an extension, it's usually the expectation that they have a kind of a plan of when they're going to comply with the order. Sometimes, particularly these days, if you had to order windows, you got weeks to wait for windows. And there are some significant construction issues in this unit. I think we touched on a little bit the ceiling heights and stuff like that, which are a bit of a challenge with the housing code. So it's kind of a short summary of that.
All right, great. So I need to know we got Jim, when was your last inspection? Do you know when that was?
The 22nd last week.
22nd. Okay, so sorry, thank you. I do know we got a note from Attorney Gould on looks like the 1st of June saying most of the items had been taken care of at that time. So maybe we can identify which pieces maybe were corrected and something has changed or weren't corrected and had been planned to be, and then we can work on that room size issue, it sounds like. Attorney Gould, do you have anything to share?
Yes, please. First of all, I want to apologize to this board. I guess I was scheduled to come before the board, but nobody told me, and I apologize. Brenda and I did communicate, and she did say she was going to check into whether I could get on the agenda and get back to me, and I'm not laying any blame on her. I could have looked up the Board of Health agenda. It just, life gets busy. So I apologize, but here I am today. The things that I want to discuss with you are the sanitary drainage system. A newly installed septic system was put in that property this past year, and Kyle Mann did the construction on that. He's a pretty reputable installer in town, and he knows that he has some fill and compliance to finish. It's all installed. It's all in working order. He's just got to finish the fill, send in the as-built, and have Jim approve it. The rest of the stuff that is mostly handyman carpentry in nature, which is much of the list and not life-threatening, but necessary, he also agreed to do for us. We've had a little bit of trouble getting into the property because the tenant and the landlord are at loggerheads on other items, not having to do with this, but having to do with it because she's also disputing an eviction. So she's refused the landlord entry, and she's refused to communicate with the landlord over making times. And finally, she seems to accept Kevin as the go-between, and he's able to meet and communicate with her. But as you all probably are aware, Kevin sadly lost his grandmother, Barbara Field, after a terribly tragic accident this past month. And so he got way behind in his work. He's very apologetic, and he was the one we were relying on, so we didn't go out and shift that. And that's why we're looking for an extension. He's now back in the saddle, and I'll tell you what he's done and what he's planning to do and what else has been accomplished to satisfy the board that we're trying valiantly to get everything on the list accomplished. So the sanitary system is, as I said, just the final fill around the septic tank is settling. So it's got to be, I think, Jim, you can correct me, but it's got to be filled a little more. And then he's going to submit the as-built. The electrical work, he's addressed a lot of it, but he's going to call in an electrician to address the rest. The microwave and the fan not being functional. I don't know that you have to rent a unit with a microwave, but we did go out and buy a new one. It's all set for installation. He's planning to do that a week from Wednesday. He's arriving at the property at 8 a.m. The center stove burner was working when he got there. The outlet in the back bedroom, there's 2 light switches. One of them works. The other one doesn't seem to do anything. So that doesn't seem to be a code violation or a code issue. It's just a second outlet that doesn't go anywhere and doesn't work. But I'll have the electrician look at that. I think the outlet in the kitchen has a protective cover now. If it doesn't, the electrician will address that. And then the bulkhead and the outdoor water tap, he's going to address Wednesday. Like to put the ceiling height item on the end of this discussion, if you don't mind. The egress obstruction, the landlord had provided the tenant with a washer and dryer. She either didn't like the washer or found a better one or different one on eBay. She put the old washer out in front of the door at the exit, and the new washer doesn't fit and it's blocking the door. The landlord didn't do that. The tenant did it. We just bought a stackable, dryer over washer that will fit, that will allow the door to close. She's finally agreed to let us install that. That's coming from Hunter and delivering on Wednesday of next week, again at 8 a.m. And Kyle Mann will be there to receive it, hook it up, and take care of that. So that's your egress obstruction. The locks and the latches on the windows, he'll take care of all that on Wednesday. The smoke detectors were done. The structural elements, as much as they all look to be under a word structural, a kitchen baseboard under the cabinet is not really structural. He's going to address all those things. The big issue is the basement standing water. I talked to Robert Matley about an hour ago, and he tells me that last May or this spring, he didn't know the exact date, but it was after the violation notice, Mr. Greffy, the owner contacted Matley, who's his guy for the sump pump. There had been a sump pump in there. I think the children in the unit had either moved it or taken it away. There were rain gutters and downspouts, and the children playing kicked those aside. We have now installed, or Matley tells me, he installed rain gutters, and they go to the ground and then go under the ground and away from the house so that they exit the water at the edge of the lawn. So it's not exiting at the base of the house and going back in the cellar, and it's not exiting on the lawn so the children have a place to play. He also installed a brand new sump pump in the cellar in this past spring, he said. Again, the rest of the things, there seems to be some, seals, SEALs, that need to be done on the vanity top, and some deck boards that are rotted. Kyle's going to address all that on Wednesday. On the weather-tight elements and the screens, he's going to address that. This is an older house. It's really a house that will eventually and soon be torn down, either because we've evicted the tenant or because she's been allowed to stay by the housing court for whatever period of time. But eventually, this house is going to be torn down and a new one built, which is why we got the 4-bedroom septic system and why we've installed it already. In the meantime, we want to make it safe and airtight for her, obviously, and we're going to do that. As far as the screens go, I don't think you can even order screens for that size window anymore. He's going to staple or install screens on the outside so they can open the windows to get a little air and circulation in the summertime, and that'll be done Wednesday. I say Wednesday. I'm sure he's going to start it at 8 a.m. Wednesday and continue until it's done. The rodents were exterminated. I think Mr. Greffy saw evidence of the mouse traps being set. And the last one is remove old concrete post anchors. Again, Kyle's going to take care of that. And again, our apologies. We had no control over the loss in Kyle's family and the fact that that set him back. And at the very beginning of this, we sort of had to navigate a way to get the tenant to communicate with someone to allow the entry into the house to get the work done. But I think we're on course now. So those are the items on this list. I think, as Mr. Greffy points out, there's nothing life-threatening anymore, just and not even safety things so much as they are things that we will correct and we know we need to correct, but they're not life-threatening. On the ceiling height in the back bedroom, once again, this house is not going to be maintained in perpetuity. It's ready to be, eliminated and raised to put in a new house on the lot. That ceiling height is not less than 7 feet throughout. It happens to be a long bedroom where it dips down at the end. So most of it, I think Mr. Greffy will confirm, is above 7 feet. It's just a portion of it that's under 7.
No, I think it starts at like 81 inches and goes down to 68.
Okay, well, so we're looking for a waiver on that one item because it's an older home. I don't know how you can raise a ceiling at this point in time.
Okay, I'm going to, if it's okay, we're going to start with the orders of correction, and then let's talk about the separate issue of habitability of the room with ceiling dimensions in that piece, because I think that's a separate discussion probably. So I'm going to open it up to the floor. Let's start with Kevin Baker. Do you have any questions, comments?
Thank you for attending this meeting. I think it gives us some clarity on the situation and what the owner has and has not done to correct the list. It's too bad that the tenant and the owner don't have an amicable relationship at this point, and the items can't be corrected sooner. I'm glad you have a go-between that you can trust that's willing to be the middleman on this. And yeah, please get it done as soon as possible. I don't know where we are as far as dates, Jim, how late we are in getting it done, or if we're going to give another extension today for 30 days to allow these things to be completed. Ceiling height notwithstanding.
So at this point here, the time to have completed them has passed. And so what you would need to do as a board is to grant an extension. And that's why, knowing the time that the owner needs to actually do the work, if that's reasonable to the board, you could grant that.
So it sounds like if he gets in on Wednesday, what is that, the 6th? I don't have my calendar in front of me. 5th. That things would likely be done by the end of that week, by the Friday, or Attorney Gould, what would you say is a reasonable expectation?
I would expect him to do about 80% of what's remaining by Friday, and would like the board to consider giving us a little extra time in case whatever doesn't get done. That is the July 4th holiday week, and I don't know if he's going to have trouble both with materials, supplies, or subs. I've got to get an electrician in there.
So 2 weeks will be okay?
I think 2 weeks should be adequate.
Okay. Why don't we give an extension for 2 weeks, and then you come back and let us know? The question is, then the board will make a decision. And you mentioned that the house is going to be demolished soon?
Well, we have to wait until the tenant is able or willing to vacate, but
right.
We're going to do what we can to tackle this list so that we have the ability to go forward with a eviction when it's ripe.
So this will be a temporary situation?
Yes.
I suggest I make a motion to give an extension for 2 weeks.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
We have a motion. We don't have a second. Before we advance the motion, I would like to see if anybody else have any questions or comments. I certainly have one or two. So next on our list, Kevin Davis, do you have any questions, comments about the orders of correction?
No, notwithstanding the ceiling height. I agree with the 2 weeks, and we can put her on for the July 10th meeting. And then if that pleases the board to put her on
12.
Yeah. But I'm done with
Okay.
that. I have nothing else.
Thank you, sir. Gino, did you have any other questions or comments regarding the orders of correction?
Well, she asking for 2 weeks. I made the motion to extend it for 2 weeks, and then this is all temporary. So maybe in several months, they will vacate, and then they're going to build a new home. What do you think about Jim? That be okay?
Well, so I think we want to think about it in two different ways. I mean, there's an occupant in the house. We can't just make temporary fixes. They need to fix the violations. I always tell owners of property the quickest way to deal with a housing situation is to fix the issues, because then, as Ms. Gould indicated, you're much better chance if you have to take any kind of proceedings against an occupant that's in a house. Judges usually don't like the fact that you're trying to evict someone because they've complained about the conditions of the unit.
So this is the only solution you have, practically. Nevertheless, I said the extension is for 2 weeks when the house has been done as you had expected. The question is, the house sooner or later is going to be demolished and rebuild it, and sooner they're going to get the person out of the house. And it's very easy to evacuate the individual with a court order. They have to move if the owner wish to rebuild a new home. You got to give them a break.
Thank you, Gino. Dr. Wason, do you have any questions, comments?
I do. Who is the electrician? Is there an electrician lined up?
So the items are going to be looked at by Kyle, and to the extent that they're just the electrical outlet or covers, he can address them. The microwave, the washer dryer, that's all going to be hooked up by Hunter when they come. If we need to bring in an electrician, I work with, I got to look him up. I just had him over my property today and I just blanked on the name, but I'll use my own electrician and bring him in. Bernie's got electricians. The owner of the property has electricians in his employ, but the tenant has refused to allow his employees to go in because of the animosity. So I suspect I can get Henry Parley or my own electrician in there fast if I need to, Doctor.
Oh, okay, I just asked because you said that they were going to hire an electrician, so
right.
It's still depending on the work. I just 2 weeks is not a lot of time if people are booked and you're trying to get somebody in. So if you feel like you have access to those individuals and are going to be able to get it in within that window, I would say I have a low appetite for stretching this out very long because I don't feel like there have been letters, this has been noticed. I know other things happen in the world, but I haven't gotten a lot of forward information about kind of the going-ons of how this has transpired. Instead, from my perspective, from this board, it just looks like it looks like kind of things going out into a black hole and not getting addressed. So I'm glad some things are in progress, and it sounds like a lot is going to get rocked next week. But I sure hope for the tenants that are living there, and that is their home, that things are really resolved promptly. That's all.
I understand.
Mr. Baker.
Jim, do we have any ability to make sure the tenants allow the work to be done?
So I've had that conversation. So the only time I heard that there was an issue was back at the beginning of May. There seems maybe someone had COVID or something like that. They were under quarantine, and so they weren't letting people in the house. So that's the only time I've heard that there's and at that time the state actually Department of Public Health has a one-pager interpretation on what's considered reasonable access. That when we bump into kind of personalities and inabilities to access, I generally share with people that they essentially need to allow people into the unit and with reasonable notice, and it kind of goes on to describe reasonable times and reasonable notices. So
through the chair to that question, if I may, we have numerous texts and emails from this tenant who has said she will not accept our notice of when someone is coming. She wants the particular repair people to call her and make appointments directly. And if any of you have tried to hire contractors and subcontractors in this environment, I don't know one out there who's going to stop his busy day to call a recalcitrant tenant and budget according to her schedule. So like I said, I finally found Kyle. He has developed a rapport with her. He now has the ability to text and call her and get in and bring in a sub with him if he needs to. So with all due respect, it has been a challenge. I know that Mr. Gariffi gave her a letter that said she had to cooperate, but her idea of cooperating was to say, have the repair people call her directly. And that just wasn't going to work.
Yeah, I'm not been privy to any of those texts or emails. So,
yeah. So we are trying, and now I'm going to accelerate the efforts, especially Dr. Weiss, and I appreciate that this is not going to drag. I'm going to make sure that, like I said, 80 or 90% of this will come back done, and what doesn't may have to be, brought before you as something that can't be, but looks like everything can be done.
Okay, I think we've heard from the rest of the board. I did have two quick questions for Mr. Gareffi. One, does the list that was provided by Attorney Gould sound like most of the lists that you still have outstanding that need to be addressed?
Based on my reinspection, the only things I really noted that had been done was some pest control work and those smoke detectors put in there. So the basement is dry at this point. Part of the issue with the basement is it's the house is built into the bank, and So you've got kind of a crawl space on the downhill side and a less of a crawl space that still has dirt on the uphill side. So it's a challenge. But the day I was there, there's all kinds of water coming in it. And so, like I say, it was dry on my re-inspection, but that may just be because it was dry. And we're getting further from spring, so.
Okay. I was going to say, those are kind of my two questions. Of one, was the list provided going to be addressed? Pretty much the list that you had still open. And I did have the question about the water. It sounds like a new sump pump was put in over the spring, but I'm wondering where the relationship was between your inspection earlier when there was water, the sump pump installation, if that was before or after that. And then obviously it was dry when you re-inspected, which was great. Certainly I'd be curious to see what it looks like today or tomorrow.
Right. And I think, as Attorney Gould mentioned, gutter work is probably really important, again, because the high end of the house is almost at grade. Actually, I think it's a little below grade, has a walkway around it. So I'm sure that challenge is getting the water to stay out of the basement.
And I assume that once we hear that the work is completed, that Jim would go back out and re-inspect to make sure everything's done. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. If no one else has any conversation, comments, questions, I will entertain a motion regarding the punch list for orders of correction, not including the room size waiver request.
So, Mr. Chair, I think we have a motion on the floor already.
Okay.
So I'll second that 2 week.
All right, we have a motion for 2 weeks, which puts us to July 12 for correction. Double check my math, because I certainly could be wrong. Thank you, Dr. Wason. All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Yes.
Gino Fratelloni.
Yes. Thank you.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And the chair votes yes. Order correction extension for 2 weeks till July 12th has passed. Attorney Gould, please talk to your client and notify Jim as soon as repairs have been completed and it's ready for re-inspection.
Thank you. Clarification, right. Mr. Chair, clarification. You spoke of continuing till the 10th of July. Do you still want me to appear on the 10th with a status?
That was my date. That's the wrong date. I apologize.
Yeah. No, our next reading is Wednesday, July 12th.
Perfect. Okay.
At this point, so our notice would have to go out on Monday the 10th for the hearing for that Board of Health meeting for open meeting law 48-hour requirement. If the repairs are done and inspected and passed per Jim Greffy's approval, then I don't think I see a reason for you'd have to come back before the board. Again, as long as it's corrected and it's been inspected and approved, I don't see a reason for it to come back before us. If that has not happened before that date, then we would, I think, like to see you come back and talk to us of what the current status is and why that didn't happen.
Thank you.
Seems reasonable.
Very reasonable. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. All right. So the second item for 37 Dogwood is a question about habitable and occupiable space for a room. We have not seen floor plans of the house or that room or dimensions of those pieces. So if of either Mr. Greffy or Ms. Gould could share the best of their ability, the room size, ceiling height, percentage of the room that's under, because room size and occupability falls under state building code as opposed to public health code, but we are kind of enforcing that as well, which because it's part of habitability, so it falls under, in this case, whether the space is considered habitable or not. And there are a number of different variables that fall into, is a room habitable based on floor square footage, wall length, ceiling height. So we kind of need some of that information before we be able to even really discuss it. We need to know where we are right now. Is anyone, are either of you able to share that kind of information so we can make an informed decision?
I cannot, but I can bring it back from Kyle when he goes there.
Yeah, and I think if you were going to grant a variance, you'd probably want to have that on the agenda as a specific. So roughly speaking, the room is probably 10 by 10, 10 by 12. The ceiling height, it pitches from the high side all the way across. So it's kind of a gentle slope roof. And it goes from, like, I believe it's about 81, 82 inches at the high end of it, down to 68 at the wall on the other end of it. So in the housing code, they talk about, if more than 3/4 of the room is under 7 feet, I was just trying to find it really quickly, it's not considered a habitable room. And so, and the code also talks about the amount of square footage that an individual needs to have in a room. So the first occupant has to have a certain amount of square footage, and then you add after that. So those numbers are in the code as far as bedrooms and rooms in the house. There's also a process for variances that I haven't been involved in a variance in the housing code, so I'd have to take a look at. But if that was the request, then I would say they should file, and probably with a plan of the room so that you can actually get a better than my kind of seat of the pants inspection of it.
As a member of the board, I would agree that a formal process with actually plans and diagrams of square footage, full house, because yes, requires at least one room of 150 square feet. Other bedrooms can be 70, right, but no more than 50%. There's a whole long list of criteria.
Right, exactly.
So, yep. So obviously, yeah, if Attorney Gurley, if you can talk to your the homeowner and actually submit a formal request for a variance, and we can identify the information, get the facts, and make an informed decision either way. But I think without having actual numbers and be able to actually see how big a variance this is. Are we talking 3 or 4 square feet? Are we talking, 50% beyond the building code recommendation? I think we need to be aware of that before we be able to make any meaningful, unless any other members of the board have a different perspective. Yes, Matt Wason.
Sorry, not different. Compounding. Has there been any look at changing the dimensions of this room?
This is a very tiny, probably 1-bedroom house. The tenant has never paid rent. She's been in there since 2019 and she's never paid rent. So the answer to your question is no. The whole purpose of designing a septic system was to tear the house down and build new, but she's at this point squatting. So okay. What we do about it, I'm not sure. I really don't know. If this can't be a variance, and this is a pre-existing, it's about a 40-year-old house. It pre-exists probably today's building code. If it can't go by variance, the logical question is, does this tenant have to be put out because it's not habitable? And I don't know where she'd go. She has no money. So just a catch-22 all around, Doctor.
I appreciate that. I just want to know if at any point the owner of the property, once notified that the room did not meet the dimensional requirements of the state housing code, did they look at a solution? And I honestly don't care if that solution cost $1 million, but if nobody has looked at a solution, then I'm not feeling wild about it, because I am hard pressed to grant a variance if I've given no other solution.
I hear you.
It's been months since this was reported, and I would appreciate it if they get somebody, anybody, contractor, architect, whatever, to look at that property, not only bring me as-built, but put together a solution, whether that requires raising the roof 2 feet. It doesn't have to be something that we're going to go down, but I'd sure like to see some due diligence in saying, well, here's what it would take to do that, and therefore these are the ramifications of that, because I would feel much better positioned to make kind of a recommendation if I saw that information. Whether the status of the tenants should not play into this decision, the goal of the building should not play into the decision. I feel it should be simply about, this is the room, how it's constructed, this is the way it could be changed, and that is either absurd or realistic, and then what are the ramifications for the decision that we make? And I would pivot that to, well, as Jim, to say, before we have a vote on a variance or any sort of discussion about that, I would like this board to be abundantly clear as to what would happen whether we choose A or B.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Davis, excuse me, Mr. Baker.
In my opinion, this is all moot point. This is a pre-existing non-conforming room dating back to, I think, was it 1940? I don't think I don't think anything's going to change. And Dr. Wasson, I appreciate your opinion about the plan for the property and the plan for the home, but really it's just going to be raised. And in this one particular situation, I don't even feel the need for us to grant the variance on it, or even look at it. I think it's pre-existing, non-conforming, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Now, obviously, we're not really discussing the variance tonight. We will need a formal process to request that. I do have one quick question. So this is, Attorney Gold said this is a one-bedroom house. Is this non-conforming room the bedroom, or is this in an additional room?
I don't know, Mr. Chair. I will find that out.
That's going to be one of the questions, I think, for the variance request.
I think it's actually a two-bed. I think one of the bedrooms is very small, but I think they're using it as a two-bed. So I'll check. I've been in it only several years ago once, so I'll have to go back and check.
The room in question is set up as a bedroom.
All right. Well, then, I know Brenda is here and Jim is here, so they will both, I'm sure, keep their eyes open for your variance request, and you'll be placed on the agenda at the next available meeting after your waiver request is submitted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any last items before we allow Attorney Gould to step out? I think we're good. Attorney Gould, any questions for the process moving forward?
No, thank you very much for your time tonight and your consideration.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
And for the chair, in my notes, I'll have a link to where I found the housing code. So I'll put that in my notes and submit that way. So that way we have an actual list of what's supposed to be where and what.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I did share out the 780 CMR 5304 ATOL, which is, I believe, the building code, which just applies to room sizes. So if you could include that in the minutes, that would be great.
So this is the 105 CMR Department of Public Health Minimum Standards of Fitness for Human Habitation, State Sanitary Code, Chapter 2.
And that's the regulations that the board enforces?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We are now at 7:38. We have a discussion for 7:10 for portable toilet permitting in the town of Littleton. I actually asked this to be placed on, so I'm going to use chair privilege and explain why I asked to be put it on. We know at some point in the past, a permitting request was placed on the town of Littleton's Board of Health website with a $25 fee for permitting of portable toilets. Having looked at the town regulations, I can't find any regulations under the Board of Health or the town requiring the permitting of portable toilets in the town of Littleton. Looking at the state code, there's permitting for septic haulers and those pieces, but actually for the plastic cube, I can't find any regulation requiring permitting. That does not mean that the Board of Health would be beyond its scope to choose to enact such regulation. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if anybody here has the institutional historic knowledge of how that came to be. I have reached out to Diane Corey, that the copy of the town code, which is in E360, the town's electronic bylaw and regulation repository, just to make sure nothing may have been passed in the past and simply not been included into the electronic system. I have not heard back. So I think we just need to have a quick discussion of, one, if anyone, I know Gino's been on the board a long time. Kevin, this is your second term. Has any perhaps institutional knowledge beyond we need a form for a permit and a check, or or if other things, if there's actual regulation that was passed at some point. I did do a minute search on our town website without finding anything in the minutes of the searchable minutes on our website. So I'd like to open up to the board. One, any historical knowledge that would be helpful identifying this, and two, what should we do moving forward? Since I feel bad saying it, but in the nature of transparency, it is potentially possible we have a permitting process without a regulation to support it. I'm hoping that's not correct, but that's what it appears to be at the moment.
Well, then I guess that means if there isn't a regulation that's there supporting it, and if Jim doesn't have any institutional knowledge of anything like that, then I guess this means we either get rid of the permitting fee or we put in regulations, one or the other. My 2 cents.
I think when you do that, you're going to be challenged. There is no way that anybody, when they use to build or something, to put maybe 1 or 2 or 3, and then nobody pays $25 for each one of them for a permit. They do this as a courtesy. And the state will not mandate. So you want to try that, somebody's going to challenge you. And it won't be the first time that we've been challenged. And then you will say, we made a boo-boo.
Hey, Jim, it looks like you had something right in the tip of your tongue.
Well, I was going to say, not all of our towns have regulations for porta potties, but I know the town of Lancaster does. So after the meeting, I can certainly send you. It's a very short one-pager that, so if you look at Title V, kind of in the very beginning of it, it talks about the purpose of it, to manage and monitor installations and design and transportation of sewage. So that's kind of where your authority fits in to do it. And so just having simple regulations. The only thing I can say about the appearance of that permit form is at some point in time, shortly after the electronic permitting system came in, there seemed to be a section on the permitting for porta potty. It's like, okay. I thought maybe it was a building thing where, some towns, if you're building on the site, they want you to have a portable toilet there. And sometimes when you're doing renovations at a house, the homeowners don't want you in the house, so you have a porta potty on the site. So I thought it was a kind of an extension of a building permit process. But then I got asked to sign one of those porta potty permits. It's like, okay. So I generally, where is it? Who's pumping it? Are they licensed? Just kind of a cursory check. And that's kind of the best I can tell you about that process.
All right. I will reach out to our acting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Baker.
The portable toilet fee process was something that occurred early on in when I was just joining the board. I do remember Michelle Cobley presented, or maybe it was Janet Fairchild presented that we begin to charge for portable toilets. I don't think there was ever a discussion of a regulation. It just became sort of a fee in a form that was created and then sort of put alongside a building permit, where anybody who was applying for a building permit was sort of notified that they had to do this as well. I don't believe there's ever a regulation discussed.
Okay, I will reach out to the building department again. When I did my search of bylaws for Littleton, I did not see anything, but I will reach out to the building department see if they maybe have some institutional knowledge or history of how their side works. Again, we certainly know there are some regulations, and we're going to talk about a little bit later, the plastic bag ban, which was enacted by town meeting, but it's going to be enforced by the Board of Health. So again, sometimes regulations get put in place that are outside the Board of Health scope or any other department scope, but that board or department becomes the monitoring enforcement agency. So I will double check with the building department as probably the only other related department who would be involved or have knowledge or interest in portable toilets here in Littleton, and see if they have any input. In the meantime, do we looks like Matt Wason wants to say something. I see the fingers. Go ahead, Doc.
Well, just 2 little points. The existing form on our webpage has a specific question about number of guests at an event, which makes me feel like it wasn't just the building department going down the road, because I feel like it was also put in place for large social functions, which makes me feel like there was a Board of Health influence there at least. And then secondly, I have seen copies of the form filled out. So it has been used in the past. We have some, and I believe they were maybe 2 years ago. So not that long ago, they were entered, but that's it.
All right. Thank you. That's certainly, it's there. And like all of us, certainly some folks are very proactive and they see that and they know they're going to use one. So they fill out the form and pay the fee and happy to comply because they're good rule followers. I just want to make sure that we are fully supported in our action. So certainly we can reach out to Parks and Rec. I'm not sure. I mean, that's kind of a limited population that Parks and Rec would really have authority over. At Fay Park and Castle Trees and a few other spots, I don't think that would necessarily cover everybody. I'm not sure. Again, we can I'll talk to the town administrator as well and see if we can identify, is there any place else that this may have come up and gotten us to this point and onto the Board of Health's radar. Short term. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Kevin Baker, you raised your hand. I was rude.
It just dawned on me. This was all in regards to Soaring Hawk. That's when it came up, because we weren't comfortable with them having X number of guests utilizing their septic system. So the idea was to bring in portable toilets and fill out the form and pay the fee, so it can be tracked.
So this could have potentially been an individual waiver requirement for an individual building or agency or
hosting events.
So this could have not been a regulation. This could have been simply for one facility in town as part of their waiver process to allow them to operate.
That's where the idea came from. Anyway, that's where it started.
Okay. But we're not sure where it went from that.
It went on the website.
All right. So short term, how would we like to proceed in the very short term? Sorry, Kevin, give me 1 second, Kevin Davis. I'm hesitant to leave a form up and accept checks and forms if we are not confident that there is regulatory authority to continue that. Until either that's clarified or changed. But that's just my perception on this one. It's, I think it happened out of good faith, out of a good situation, and the loop didn't get closed as to supporting it. At least that's what it appears to be. Again, it may have been, it's just not fully documented or published. So Kevin Davis, go ahead.
Sorry, one more point. Quick searching of the interwebs. And a very similar form is in the town of Groton. Does not have the same number of people or anything like that, but a very similar form is in the town of Groton. I'll include it in the notes just for informational purposes.
As Jim said, Lancaster has it. Certainly, I know many of other communities. If you want to use one, you need to make sure that it's being reputable. It's a septic hauler because it's septic system. It's waste haulage through town, all kind of things we would think of for any other septic system. It's just a very small, isolated septic system.
Yep.
So it's not unusual to have this process. I'm just not sure that the process was fully completed here in Littleton when it came up. So,
agreed.
The other nice thing about having that information is if it starts to stink, if it gets knocked over, the name is on it, so you can call the person, come take care of it. So.
Yeah, as I know, Jim had shared a story actually here in town where one was located in a difficult position and had leaked or tipped over, and it created an environmental concern that only came up because of it spilled and someone complained and said, "What do we do?" And so it certainly happens. And I think it's a reasonable request. But again, we can certainly talk about what numbers look like and process looks like. So. This is not a public hearing, but I'm not sure we need a public hearing for an administrative matter of temporarily suspending the permitting process. I'm simply not sure from a process side, but we're not waiving a regulation. We're not suspending a regulation. We're addressing an administrative quirk. Best I've got. Again, I think, can we administratively request or just let Brenda know and Jim know as our agents and admin folks that if it comes up that, the permitting process is on hold at the moment and it's not required and until something changes. I think that seem like a reasonable action from the board. Yes, Dr. Mason.
Yes, I support that. I would say we have the link taken off the website, effective immediately, and we work on creating a real regulation. I think there's value in it. So let's get the example from Lancaster as a starting point, and let's put on our agenda as an actual public hearing to flesh out what the regulation would look like and move forward from that. Yeah.
All right. Again, not really a public hearing. I'm not sure if we need to take a vote, but we're going to do it anyway because we're here just to make sure we're all clear and above board that while not a public hearing, it is an administrative action that we all agree and are on board, or at least the majority agrees. So roll call vote for suspending or putting on hold the permitting process for porta potties here in Littleton until the outstanding issues are clarified. So Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis, yes.
Gino Fratelloni.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And the board votes yes. All right. I will be in touch with, for now, Jim, please consider yourself notified.
I so notified. And I'll send you that.
Thank you, sir.
I'll send you that regulation tonight so you can, it's only one pager. It doesn't need to be difficult. So it gives you a starting point. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Brenda as well. Again, you don't need to pipe in, but just so you're aware that, yep, if someone calls and asks, that is currently not a required permit at this time in the town of Littleton, but keep your eyes open because it may be in the future.
That. And I'll take it off the web. Thank you.
Oh, if you're able to do that, that was going to be great. I was going to talk to town administrators to talk to IT to do that, but if you could do it, awesome. I would make the suggestion of keep a copy of the file of what the permit looks like in case we decide we love that form. We just want to put it back up so we don't have to start from scratch. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. If we have no other discussion on portable toilets, we're going to go to our 720 discussion around the code of conduct. This was also my item. And the code of conduct and administrative matters kind of all flow together. So I'm actually, if it's acceptable to the board, go slightly out of order. If we can look at the ID decision support tool, only because code of conduct, administrative matters, kind of, there's a lot of overlap between a number of different items that might just be easier to keep in one discussion if that's acceptable to the board.
Yes, we can move through this quickly because I don't have a tool to show today because it is currently under a remodel project as promised at our last meeting. So next time we will have a new version to look at and no data today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. I certainly know the last email we saw come out, which was over the weekend, I believe, for last week's numbers. I think there were 2 or 3 deaths in Massachusetts. So it's still out there. There's still hundreds of cases. There still are every week a few deaths. Sometimes it's single digits. Sometimes it's 20 or 30, but it is still out there. Please be careful and cautious and thoughtful. As someone who survived 2.5 years without getting it, I got it a few months ago and it's impactful. All right, so code of conduct. As a bit of a backstory, again, I asked to add this to our meeting tonight. A week and a half ago, Matt Wason and I met with our town administrator, a member of the select board, as well as a member of the human resources department here in Littleton for a number of different items. Administrative and operational support for the board. A bit brings us back to porta potty regulation of how a regulation without enforcement process and how do we make those things happen. Also looking at clarifying communication paths between boards and town hall to keep it clean and simple, and also allow the board to be thoughtful about requests. Brenda is awesome, and we are so glad that you are here with us, but we also certainly recognize that we are one small slice of Brenda's daily workload. supporting the building department, which is a very, very busy department between building inspections, electrical, plumbing. It's a very, very busy department, particularly these days with all of our work here in town. So while we are certainly not less important than other departments, we are one piece of her pie. So we want to make sure we are thoughtful about how we prioritize our needs and requests to her, and give Brenda or whoever the admin is at any given time moving forward. Not saying you're not going anywhere, Brenda, just in general, so that our process is consistent, so that we as a board kind of prioritize what is most important for her to, again, simply assist her in her process of, I've gotten 7 requests, what's most important, which should I start on, or what should I, if I've got 20 minutes, where do I spend those 20 minutes? Where what we think is most important may be different than what someone else has expressed or what she thought, just because that's the way it is. No one, knows our priorities but us. So the recommendation has been made. So we'll start with code of conduct. The select board back in March, I believe, began the discussions around a select board code of conduct. It should be in our minutes. It is, again, the idea is to summarize their 4-page code of conduct. We are civil to each other. We are civil to our citizens, our vendors, such as Jim, our employees in town, and that we do our best to accomplish the goals of our responsibilities in the most clear and transparent way possible. It's pretty straightforward. For select board, while they are the executive body of the community, they have direct responsibility for only 3 people in town. The police chief, the fire chief, and the town administrator are the only 3 positions in town who directly report to them. So as part of that, they really identified that the select board, for example, really should be only directing questions, comments, concerns about anything to one of those 3 people, because those are the only 3 people who directly report to them. For us as the Board of Health, we're in kind of a funny position that technically Brenda kind of reports to us for 0.2 or 0.15 or some point something FTEs as our administrative support. Jim doesn't report to us. He's a vendor. He's a contracted, and he certainly is vital to our community, and I'm not minimizing that, but he reports to the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, who we have a contract with. He's, again, and Jim, you're here, and I'd say it if you weren't here, incredibly responsive, incredibly knowledgeable, but he's a contractor. So we're going to treat him with respect and appreciate what he does for us. But beyond that, those are basically the extent of our scope of authority, I guess, is the easiest way of saying it, of who we're responsible for. Any other requests for support from town, which, again, we're a regulatory and enforcement and judiciary board in town, which there are not many of, who can set their own regulations, judge whether they've been complied with, and enforce their own actions based on that. It's boards of health have a very unique role that most communities don't realize until you've been on one, that boards of health are different than most other boards. That we want to try to minimize direct communication between Board of Health and Board of Health members and departments unless otherwise directed. So, the example is if we'll use our porta potty discussion we just started and taking something off the website. So it certainly would be very, very easy for us to say, hey, Brenda, do it. We have done that. Brenda says, I don't know how to do that. Well, I'll just talk to IT and have them do it. So asking Brenda to do that is certainly probably pretty reasonable. Having one of us reach out directly to IT and say, I need you to do this for us, while seems like a reasonable, simple request, we have no idea what else is on their piece, their plate. So the recommendation, again, for the select board's actions, and they've made the recommendation for other boards, and I don't think it's unreasonable, is all communication going to town hall should go through town hall, which would be the town administrator's office, whether that's the town administrator themselves, the associate or the assistant town administrator, or their admin as the director of communications, just so folks are aware, and that, again, same way we could prioritize, the town administrator is going to have a much better sense of town priorities, perhaps, and be able to feedback going, I'd love to do that, but I do know that IT is switching over our servers in the next 2 weeks, so that they're probably not going to have time to make those changes you're looking for. So that it gets that communication out there to us, but also it minimizes the need for an individual department or department head or employee in department to have to share that with multiple different boards. We're doing a server, we're doing a server, we're doing a server, we're doing a server, when it could have been stopped right at the beginning. So we have the select board's version that they have adopted as a code of conduct, as a starting point. It is not on as a public hearing. It is on a discussion point. Basically, I shared it out with the group. Take a look. Obviously, it will need some edits for us, not the least of which it says select board in every place. And some of the pieces are clearly directed at their actions opposed to ours. I will share that we are obviously in a very different perspective at the moment as a result of the nature of our board. That Jim does a number of things for us, but Jim does not do everything for us as a health agent. That, you know, he saw the portable toilet permit come across his desk, but without being a town employee who's here in town every day, he would never necessarily know that was there or go, I don't think we can support that. I don't think we actually have a regulation for that. Again, he's covering multiple different places. I would never expect him to both be aware of our town regulation and that process, and the fact that there could be a disconnect between them. As well as certainly, for example, our plastic bag ban that goes into effect on August 1st, that we have been tasked with enforcement. Our only enforcement agent is Jim and the Neshoba team. So that's basically adding an additional regulatory and enforcement action to him and his team. And I admit, I'm not sure if we've had a conversation. Is that something other than educational when he does visits for normal inspections is something that would be within their scope or ability as far as time and resource to enforce? I don't know. And I think that's part of, again, a discussion as we look at that. Is that something that is functionally enforceable with the resources we have, which is Jim and Brenda, Jim and his team and Brenda. So code of conduct, again, we're not going to implement it tonight. I think if everyone can please take a look, make some edits if you think that they're appropriate, see what your thoughts are, see if we need it. You know, it's all of us are excited about trying to do things the right way. And it's hard when, you know, we should be a regulatory body. We should be a deliberative body. We should not necessarily be an administrative body in day-to-day activities. Permits in general shouldn't be coming across any of our desks unless it is something that our professional staff has said, I'm not comfortable signing this one off, or it's outside of the things that needs a waiver, or this is, while it looks like it's okay, it is a big item that probably should have the board say, sign off on it rather than simply me as the agent. That piece of it is kind of where we should be. So we shouldn't necessarily be doing QA, QI. We shouldn't necessarily be looking at when the last time someplace was inspected. We need to know. And I think certainly we've talked to Jim in the past about finding a way to like get some level of activity reports so we know when inspection's been done, how many septic systems are going in a given month or time frame, simply so we have that knowledge as a board of, nope, work is getting done, inspections are being done. Hey, I haven't seen Dan Kane grocery store being on the inspection reports in the last year. I wonder if it was done or not. And we can go back and clarify, oh, it was done. I'm sorry, I forgot to put on the report, or actually, you know what? It fell through the cracks and it wasn't. And that's that piece where we can have some communication with our agent going, you know what? We probably need to make sure that we do our 6-month inspections as required. And now we have that communication between our professional staff and us as the oversight body. But again, this is a big piece that without having that staff in place to try to be non-administrative, but without an administrative staff, it is a hard place to be in. And coming out of our meeting with the select board and town administrator, it was acknowledged. They felt our pain. If it makes you feel any better, that we are one of the few regulatory bodies in town without actually a paid professional staffer. Again, Jim is awesome, but he's covering a million other things outside of the town of Littleton that we are one little slice of his pie. That's hard to do really meaningful day-to-day operational and administrative oversight of what's happening here in town with his role, because that's not his role. His role is to be an agent and to be support and knowledge. It's not being here, answering every question, and being aware of every reg and those pieces. So, and it would be unfair, as much as we'd love for him living in the building department 40 hours a week, we know that's not realistic. So I babbled. I apologize for that. So let's open it up. We'll start with code of conduct. Anything, Matt?
I was just going to kind of build upon that with an example, and kind of this conversation is, yes, it's like, I think we've got a lot of people on this board, which is great, who are very interested, invested in improving the health of the town. And I'm one of those. I want to go get it. I want things to improve. I want things to move forward. But it's, how do we not get ourselves having to be involved in operations? Because that's also not a crutch that anybody should learn to lean on. Because the more we do that kind of stuff, I think that actually hurts our growth over the future. Because if there is no apparent need for us to get a director of health and develop and establish a department of health, then where's the driver for that? If people say, oh, well, doesn't the board just take care of that? So I'd like to be able to say, no, the board does not actually take care of that. So a piece of it is, I think we should have more conversations here about what priorities we want to request next, and then have those requests go in. And the example I'm going to use are the trash hauler regs. So we've been working on this for many, many months, and I was talking to Kevin about this last week, and there's a lot to do with the trash hauler regs. We need to have a letter sent out to the trash haulers. We need to have the trash haulers be able to submit their application and pay their fee. And we need the regulations to be followed and potentially inspections to occur. I'm not sure about that one. But all of those pieces are different people are responsible for every single one of those. And I think it will only help us to be able to say, you know what, we're taking this directly to the town administrator and saying, town administrator, this is what has to happen. The board has established a regulation. It is voted. It is passed. Here you go. I don't think that then I would see the town administrator composing the letter, working with Brenda, for example, or Jim, for example, to establish who receives the letter, working with IT to establish the processes by which the application will be created online, because that's an open gov process. And then whammo, telling us that it's all done when we're ready. And then we can have the conversation about what the next steps are. And similarly, I don't want to be in a position in a group like this where I go to Jim and say, hey, Jim, will you start doing inspections of our trash haulers? Because Jim is going to feel obliged, because he's a nice guy, to say yes, or might not want to say no. And I would actually prefer that be handled, because it's operations, by a town administrator to Neshoba conversation, to say, this board has asked for this. Town administrator can work with Neshoba and say, is this in the realm of responsibility that you would be accustomed to handling? And that way, if the answer is no, it's not a Board of Health versus Neshoba conversation. It's operations and administration, like you said. And so that we can just get the answer back from town administrator saying, process is in place, here's how it's going to end up. Or we're stuck. We need to have some further conversation. So that's kind of what I throw out. And as the last thing is, I do want to discuss today as to if that's one that we want to work on next, the trash hauler regs, then I'm happy to kind of compose that and get that off to town administrator. But the example of the plastic bag ban is another case. I feel like if that's another priority, which it is because it has a deadline, it's coming up very soon. I feel like that's another one that, no offense to Brenda, of course, who's working to get the list together, and we have an intern who's going to be involved in it. I feel like that should be handed directly to town administrator on a plate saying, this was passed. It needs to go into effect by this date. A letter needs to be written and sent out. Thank you very much. When's it going to be done? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, comments around the code of conduct and that kind of piece of things, and then we'll talk. Yes, Mr. Baker, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Kane and Dr. Wayson, for taking the meeting. I believe it was last week with the select board and town administrator and human resources. I'm glad that we've identified a path forward in communicating directly with the town administrator in regards to our needs. And I look forward to action items being presented and executed. And the code of conduct looks good. It's probably a little bit lengthy, but otherwise we'll comb through it and make some edits and change anything as necessary and send it back to the board, to the chair. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Mr. Davis.
I think what's going on in the code of conduct is a great step forward. It at least gives you some boundaries by which we can say, hey, look, this is our normal operation. However, because we're a regulatory board, I don't want to have the board beholden to an individual saying to slow roll it. Oh yeah, I'll get to it. Oh yeah, we'll just do that. That's a non-starter in my opinion. If we're asking for something to be done and it's within our purview to be executed and to be done, that needs to get done. And I understand there's a priority, like, IT shop has to upgrade the servers. You don't want to, change things out, right second after they do the upgrade and you lose all your changes. I get all that, right? But we need to have the ability not to be subservient to other individuals. So that's my 2 cents.
No, thank you, sir. I think I will share from my perspective in our meeting that we kind of made that pretty clear and used some very concrete recent examples where the board had asked for actions to be taken and other either bodies or departments had a difference of opinion of what actions needed to be taken based on our actions. And that was a discussion point that came up, and it was recognized that I'm not sure it was resolved, but it was brought up. So the town administrator and our select board rep were made aware that, there are times when we are limited we are required to do certain things, but we are limited in our ability to do them because of the nature of our department and support. So not dismissing it. I think you're preaching to an agreeable room. But I think it certainly has been expressed, and I think it was at least heard. I do not know if any action will be taken based on that, but I think it was heard. So, yes, sir. Sorry, Mr. Baker.
In response to Kevin Davis's comment, with the in the absence of any sort of direct administrator that's actually dedicated to the Board of Health. Brenda's got a lot on her plate, and she's not trying to slow roll anything. She's just got a lot going on. But if we did have that dedicated person administratively for the Board of Health, maybe we could, the town administrator could work with that person to sort of help prioritize some of the things that we're trying to get done. But in the absence of that person, I feel like the town administrator would be the person to communicate to all parties and implement a plan to execute on what we're trying to accomplish here.
I mean, I'm sure Matt, can voice his own opinion, but I think that's kind of where we landed for the short term with the town administrator, that would be kind of the process and utilize the town administrator's office as our resource and have their office tap other departments or other resources in town and work with Brenda Brenda kind of directly reports to the building commissioner as their full-time day-to-day in-house person about utilizing time and prioritization in those pieces. So again, I think we're all kind of on that same page, and certainly the concern of, how do you prioritize one department over another is challenging, and it's challenging. But I think at the moment we are where we are. So, but I think it's been heard. Matt Wayson.
It does raise an interesting extension question. Like you pointed out, there are 3 direct reports to the select board, which are the town administrator, the police chief, and the fire chief. It may behoove us to look at our director of health position, job description, because perhaps to be in parallel with that, we'd always talked about, well, they're going to kind of report to us, but report to the town administrator. And maybe we need to kind of swap the wording on it to make it clear that, no, they're actually a direct report to us first, with the town administrator being support. You know what I mean? It just kind of stiffed it a little bit so that we're obviously, it's the same position as the select board connecting to the town administrator, right? Obviously, the select board does not handle their day-to-day issues, but there is that direct connection and no other confounders in the way.
I don't disagree. My own kind of opinion is certainly that as department heads, the police chief, the fire chief, and the town administrator have slightly different roles, even if we had a robust health department here in town, that, you know, even grade wise in those pieces, that a director is still below town administrator, you know, for lack of kind of a better descriptor. So yeah, I certainly think we could try to wordsmith and figure out how to best identify that. I think from a day-to-day piece of the health director wants to go on vacation. I don't think necessarily that vacation process needs to be approved by us, or if they call in sick, that they have to call the chair of the board saying, hey, by the way, I'm going to be sick on Monday. I don't think that kind of, and I think that was kind of our intent when we first put it together, is that there's priority and direction and operation, not operations, but the functional roles directed by the board, with some of that administrative stuff of sick time, vacation time, office, like those kind of day-to-day operational kind of pieces by the town administrator, and a combined performance review piece between town administrator as the town's administrative officer, and us as the regulatory agency who that person reports to. But we can certainly see if we can clarify that. I know we're kind of late, as I do not believe, I've not gotten any updates of the position having gone to personnel review committee yet. So, but we can certainly look at that if we need to clarify that language a hair. That may not necessarily need to be before that grading happens. But
I guess, like you said, I'd be curious to see how that relationship between the select board and town administrator works right now. So if the town administrator wants to take a week off, do they ask for that permission from the select board, or is it handled? So I think that's I agree with what you're saying. Right. This board shouldn't be involved in that kind of stuff, but I question if the select board is involved in that kind of stuff with the town administrator and the fire chief and police chief. But I think it's just worth looking into to make sure we're kind of building a construct that makes sense, that's parallel where it should be parallel, and hierarchical where it should be.
Yeah, and I think probably our best model probably isn't necessarily that, because the town administrator reports to no one other than the select board. Where, let's pick the building commissioner, for example, should be reporting to town administrator, or the zoning administrator, or the assessor, who reports to the board of assessors, but also as a town employee reporting up to the chain of command up through the town administrator as well. So kind of see how those other models look, because those are folks who have reporting responsibilities to both, and where's a solid line, where's a dotted line, and how does that work? I think those are probably our best kind of peer models for the department here in town. I would say, again, town administrator is a hard one because they don't answer to anyone, because they're the senior administrative officer of the community before the select board. So, but we have a hand up from Mr. Mark Rumbacher, our select board representative. So I'm actually going to promote Mark. I'll give you one moment, Mark. You should be seeing a pop-up in a moment. Welcome, Mr. Rumbacher. How are you, sir?
Good. Mark Rumbacher, select board. I'm actually the liaison to your board, so I've been listening on your meeting so far today. I wanted to say that there's several examples of other boards for the reporting relationship. The library, Parks and Rec are two that come to mind immediately, where the library is slightly different. I don't know where your board fits legislatively, but like the trustees set the direction for the library director, but the day-to-day operations are actually reported up through the town administrator. I assume the same would be happening for your health agent as well, that the Board of Health will be setting his general function, but the day-to-day operations will be overseen by the town administrator. As far as your question on vacations, the town administrator, the fire chief, police chief tell us when they're taking vacations, and no one's actually ever questioned them. There's not really any, we're all grown-ups in the room, and we assume everyone's doing their job and it isn't leaving things out. So, or on, things aren't dropping that way. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
And I'm also more than willing to sit down and talk to anyone about the code of conduct, how we got there, address any questions. You can reach out to me whenever. So
great. Thank you. So again, we kind of combine these two pieces. So code of conduct, we're going to be looking for feedback, thoughts, edits, how it best fits to us. Short-term administrative process, as we as a board develop our priorities or needs, we will prioritize those and share, with Brenda if appropriate, otherwise, or almost always through town administrator. So thank you, Brenda, for hopping in, saying you'll take care of that item and not going through town administrator for popping that item off of the website. We appreciate that one. If it is a challenge or if there's an issue or something comes up, please let us know and we can go through traditional channels. But I think that's going to be the process for the short term. Once there is a director in place, then that process will be the director is our go-to person for operations, unless it needs to be escalated to, board level to town administrator, but that's some distance off. I did have kind of under the administrator process. I admit I did have a couple. I have a bunch of questions for Jim, but I'm going to see how quickly I can hit him with them and see how he does. It's going to be a quiz, speed round.
Okay.
I'll be honest. I have not seen our contract between Neshoba and Littleton and the Littleton Board of Health. So I will be completely honest and transparent. I feel bad about saying this, but I'm 2 years in. I do not know, and it came out of the trash haulers piece of the discussion, the regulation of what things does Neshoba provide as far as regulatory and permitting support, and what things don't they. So I pulled up it's somewhat dated now. It's about 13 years old. Mass DPH list of manual of responsibilities for boards of health in the Commonwealth. Manual of laws and regulations related to boards of health. Basically, what things boards are required to do, what things they might do, and then there's the catch-all, or anything else that they feel is a public health concern that they decide to make regulation for. So, I can work through my huge 17-page list of highlights, or I can be obviously you have a good sense of what you do every day and what might be some outliers that you don't do every day, but that you do provide services. So, the pop up for me, some of the ones that came up was reporting cases of cerebral palsy to the Department of Public Health is on the list of things that a Board of Health is responsible for. Issuing burial permits, issuing permits for funeral homes. So some of these things that I admit that in 2 years I've never seen. And is that because you're awesome and it's administrative, it's paperwork going in one side in the inbox and out the outbox, and it never comes to us because there is no need. And I am completely okay knowing that the things are happening, but there's no need for us to know about it other than, oh, by the way, we issued 400 burial permits and we issued 2 funeral home licenses and we did this and we did that. Great. Awesome. I don't need to know any more than that. But I'll be honest that I just don't know. So are you able to kind of share We obviously know food inspections in Title V, because those are the ones we see all the time. We certainly have seen a couple housing inspections. We know tobacco enforcement is through the Leominster Boards Consortium. So we know that's out there. Can you share some of the other things that you do that might be kind of a bit of the zebra, the once in a while kind of ones? Like, to the best of my knowledge, we have one funeral home in town, so it's one piece of paper once a year that you would see if you see it. Have those things happen, or if you know of any that you recognize that, yep, those are there, that I typically don't do. It's there, it exists, the board has responsibility, but not something that we as Neshoba handle for you.
So I guess we'll start with the funeral homes. Many years ago, there was a very tortured process whereby the state would send the boards of health a list of who you could license, and then we would issue a license. Somehow that process stopped. And again, some of our communities do it within their own administrative staff. So I'm not quite sure. To be honest, we don't issue a permit for anything in town. So if you want to know that, we don't. Just need to check that process and see, again, how that's set up. Some of our towns do it independently. With respect to the burial permits, in most of our communities, that's all handled through the town clerk, since they keep the records. So that stuff goes right to the town clerk in those regards. The cerebral palsy question is an interesting one, because that's something even we didn't know. So when we were working with the Department of Public Health and their Public Health Excellence Grant, one of the things that they did was what's called a capacity assessment. So they went through the Department of Public Health and put together a survey, which was essentially all of those things that you have on your list. They went through the regulations and said, do you do this? Do you do that? And theirs were, they were looking for some qualitative answers, like, if you don't do it, did you not know about it? Did you not have the staff for it? Did you? And so that was one of those questions both myself and our public health nurse went, never heard of it before. So we're, as part of that capacity assessment, we're going through some of that now ourselves to try to look at that. So some of your broader questions about tobacco and rubbish, and so in licensing of rubbish haulers, again, depending how a community wants to set that up. I know that our agents in certain towns will work with the administrative staff in those towns to do the permitting. So we would probably do the inspection part of it. Your administrative staff would do the permitting part of it. Because we do inspections, and if you have the regs and it says the truck is supposed to have this language and that language, and we would go through and make sure they all have that kind of stuff. We do that kind of stuff for the septic haulers anyway. We license the septic haulers and the installers for the district. Where was I going with that? So that's certainly something we could do. And again, from our perspective, it would be working in conjunction with your administrative staff. We have 60 hours worth of admin staff for 16 towns. So are we going to do that admin for you? No, because every town does it a little differently. The septic system part of it, it's kind of, and the food is kind of universally the way we do it. The regs you said on the rubbish bags, can we help you with that? I mean, I'm not sure who's required to do all that, but if it's stores, certainly we're in the food service establishments. We can certainly check in when we're reviewing the stuff with the store manager. If they're not following it, we can certainly provide that education piece of it. So again, we're willing, we can work with you on the things that you need to get done. Obviously, because we have so many communities, we do have limited time. We're looking to try to hire another person ourselves because of that capacity assessment that the state did. They said, we will provide you some money to meet certain goals. I've submitted goals to try to get another health agent so we can actually have more time to do more things for more communities. And again, that was kind of an outshoot of the capacity assessment. So to the things that you're talking about just now, we do the rubbish part anyway, kind of backwards. So if there's a complaint, we investigate. So that's a big part of the things that we do for the town is complaint investigations. And that's kind of a general catch-all. And I'll just share one with you because I'm just kind of working through it. We had a complex in town where somebody's concerned about they got a health diagnosis. They're concerned about what may be happening on the property that may be contributing to, I don't want to say too much but just so you get a flavor of it, what may be happening with on the site. So it's a multi-unit property. They kind of pointed to the landscaper saying, what are they spraying on the lawn? I want the soil tested. Well, I explained to her, I said, I have no authority to go onto the property and sample the soil. At this point, I don't have enough information to order them to test the soil. That's just not something. But what I will do is I will go through the management, find out who's doing the landscaping. Pesticides in the state are well regulated. If somebody's an applicator, they're supposed to be a licensed applicator through the state, and they're supposed to be applying in accordance with the regs. So I have talked to the management company who gave me the landscaping information, gave me their exterminator's information. Now I've got the information about the exterminator. She won't be happy with the answer because it seems like they're spraying for ants 3 times a year. I don't see, I couldn't come to you as a board and say, you need to order these people to test their soil. So those are the kind of things we dig into that don't have it's complaints in general. Well, obviously we permit the beaches. We sample the beaches for you once a week through the summer. We permit the camps. We license and inspect the camps. It's getting late. If you have a specific list, that's, yeah.
Yeah, I don't need to go through my whole highlighted list and unless someone else has a very specific question. But that sense, I think I had a sense of, I'm 2 years in here, but I was on a board in another community for a long time. So there are certainly differences in communities and standards and how they do things.
Yep.
But I just kind of that sense of, I simply don't know because I don't know.
Yep.
So we see the stuff, we see Title V, we see food service inspections, but some of those other ones I simply wasn't sure, but it also helps guide us as we are looking either short-term administrative support in-house or, longer term things that we should be working with an in-house professional to make sure that, we are as a community in compliance with the law. These are things that boards of health shall do.
Right.
We want to make sure that we are, in fact, doing them.
Right. So things like pools too is another one that comes to mind. The private and semi-private pools are inspected as well.
Okay, no, that actually is really, really helpful. I take it back. I do have one specific subdivisions.
So what happens?
Subdivisions. So go ahead. You already figured out my question.
Well, so I don't know what's your question, but let me tell you. So when subdivisions come through, we review them and provide comments. So there's a very specific law that allows the boards of health. It's a pretty powerful law, as we found out in another community, part of the general laws, because it allows the board to essentially disapprove a subdivision if you as a board feel that building on that site would be injurious to public health and safety. It is again, you mentioned boards of health have really unique powers because they're protecting public health and safety. And so that's one of those things. So generally speaking, if it's a subdivision and it's kind of run of the mill and there's no major issues on it, what I will do is generally send a letter to planning board saying the Board of Health has, approves a subdivision with these conditions. And those conditions are, that everyone's got to have proper water and sewer approvals, that they need to handle, if there's a subdivision with a lot of trees, they got to handle the wood waste appropriately, comments on the blasting, comments on drainage. You're just kind of a run-of-the-mill list that then can be incorporated by the planning board in the approval for the project.
Okay, great. That was going to be one of my questions. Certainly is, like every community in the 495 loop these days, you find some open land and someone wants to put 10, 15, 20, 800 houses on it. So, but I realized that in the last 2 years going, I don't think I've ever seen a subdivision come across our Zoom.
Right.
Certainly I think Cooper Farm may have been just before my time, but I think Bluebird Lane was shortly after I started. So we've had a couple that have come up. So I was just kind of curious of that.
Yep.
And that was one that I was new to see. I hadn't recognized that one either, other than, wait, we're supposed to do that. I can't think of I've ever seen one come across our board. So,
and so sometimes I just go along doing things because I've always just kind of done things. And that's, so anytime that the board wants to change that process, I'm open to that. Yeah.
No, I again, asking the question because I admit I just hadn't remembered ever seeing one come across. So I was just kind of curious.
Yep.
Open up to the board. I hope you kind of see where I was going. Just I think it really is helpful for us to know what our reasonable expectations of Jim as our agent are, what things either may not have been done because it's simply beyond their resource set to be able to do, or simply we just generally don't do that for you. It's community by community administrative to be done. So as we are looking at how best to function both with town hall resources, with Brenda as our admin, and with Jim as our professional, of how best we can operationalize our regulation. someone had made a comment recently that you shouldn't make regulation if you don't have the resources to enforce it. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I am, however, concerned with that the mindset of there's what you are required to do by law, and there's what the right thing is, which hopefully agree, and then simply choosing not to do it because you don't have the tools to do the rest is concerning for me. I'd rather figure out, okay, how do we operationalize the law and the regulation and our regulation that has to happen? I'd rather figure out the solution rather than simply take no action because we don't have the resources to do it. It's a catch-22. It's either you do things that are required, but can't do all of it, or you don't do anything and now nothing happens. You can't even write a letter saying, please do this, because there are no regs to say, we have the authority to say, please do this. So I hope this was helpful. If anybody else has any questions, kind of the mindset, just as we're moving forward, I think this is a good thing for us to be aware of. Certainly, for the plastic bag piece, it came up from outside of this board, but handed to us to operationalize, really. But we can hopefully work with Town Hall to make that happen. Trash hauler regs, that came from us because the state law says you will permit them. So we are required to figure out a process. So we just need to, again, we shouldn't necessarily be the administrative body operationalizing which piece of paper goes to who when, because that should not be our responsibility. But at the moment, we may need to provide some thoughts to town administration in the short term to perhaps what that could look like. Here's a suggestion of how it could work, so that town administrator is not trying to figure out how it could work. I just think all of us need to have that kind of in mind as we are looking at our administrative and operational challenges for some of our requirements. But again, we appreciate Jim and everything he does, and it's hard. We get it. So I apologize for the length of all this. I think it was important to recognize our roles, what they need to be, what things we need to do, and how, clarifying our interactions with Town Hall. We are one big community of folks who are volunteering our time to try to make things better, and working with our paid folks in Town Hall who are trying to make our community better. We're all on the same page, pointing in the same direction. We just sometimes have different takes on how to make that happen. And we just want to make sure that we recognize that even when we have differences of opinion of how something should happen, or even sometimes if something should happen, that we are clear in our expectations, and we are thoughtful about how we share those with others and to accomplish the goal.
Thank you.
I think that's it for the administrative process. I did have from Brenda that we do not have the meeting minutes of, I apologize, I have to look back at my calendar, of the 14th or the 31st, 24th, May 24 or June 14th at this point. She sounded like she had a wonderful vacation, which we are very, very happy to say that I'm glad you had a great, happy vacation, because everybody needs them. So she is just still catching up with those last couple sets of minutes. So no problem. We understand. And yes, as soon as we get those available, hopefully we'll have 3 sets of minutes to approve at our July 12 meeting. Does anybody have any member updates or correspondence that they would like to share? Hands going up everywhere. I saw Mr. Davis's first, so I'm going to go with Mr. Davis.
Hey, couple things. First thing to private well conversations. I had a conversation with the local, with one of our state university chairs for basically being able to locate all of the wells in town. If we don't have them in a format that we can geographically look at them and see where they are all on our town maps and things like that, they are more than willing as a senior project for this particular department within Framingham State University to supply a student supervised by a professor to help the town locate all of the private wells that are in town. and to put them in our geodetic information, so that way we know where they are. The professor is also, or actually the department chair has also stated that he is also willing to do, or have the students willing to do an analysis into where the wells will tie into which aquifer that is being used in town, so that we can see effects of not only quality of water, but if one well has a problem, most likely other wells will also, or could have an issue. So that way, if we needed to, if one well went bad, we could talk to and say, hey, you might want to think blah, 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 blah. So this was getting some data around, being able to support some of the decisions that we're trying to make and things like that. But the department chair was more than willing to work with us to define that role as a summer intern or even a senior project for the entire year. And because it's a state university, it would be considered gratis. So that's for the board to consider. I'm not making it as a consideration, but it's something that we can have a discussion around. And I'd be more than willing to act as the go-between to have that happen.
No, thank you. That's certainly an interesting process that I'm curious how they would figure out where all the wells are. Go out with the dividing rod, just like try to look for wells.
No,
I know. I'm really, now I'm kind of curious of what that process would be. Of how do you just find them? We all can look in someone's yard, go, that's a well. But in the backyard, I'm not going to know it's a well.
Right. No, and if it's covered by a rock or what, one of those faux rocks or whatever. I
will jump at one. You probably noticed that we did not have the well reg on for tonight for public hearing.
I'm fine with that.
We have talked about it quite a bit, and I think we have still a long way to go. We had a number of other items for tonight, which, while it looked short, it went long, which is, I will be honest, is kind of what I anticipated. So I hope no one minds that I decided to table the wells until our next one. So we have bigger fish to fry, I think, as we are just looking at process. So, but no, that's really interesting. I think, we definitely bring it up at the next board and see how we, and perhaps potentially utilize that and what kind of resources will provide us.
Other thing that I reached out to, there was another university that I reached out that has a degree granting, like Masters of Public Health and things like that, that had a conversation that they're working with other local departments of health, boards of health, that if they have things that they would like to set up as a policy or things like that, that this would be something that students are more than willing to do research and try to, help out local boards for, senior project credit sort of kind of things. So something to think about as if we want to define, like trash hauling, for example, okay, here's all the regs in the state of Massachusetts, here's where it impacts, blah, 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 blah. And they're, more than willing to do that sort of kind of work for us as well. Kind of legwork for us to kind of come up with those types of things at setting policies and things like that. So they were very interested in helping where they could as well. So that was another point. So
no, that's wonderful. We love interns who can provide us meaningful graduate level understanding and knowledge to what we're doing. Because again, we're all pretty smart, but public health, other than Jim, is not our day-to-day business. So, having someone who this is their goal doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but neither would ours be. But between all of us and that folks and their advisors, hopefully we can get some good answers and good starting points that would be save us a lot of time and effort and provide them a meaningful learning opportunity as well. So it's a win-win if that can work out.
It's all for state and local universities. So this is like a complete win-win at that point. So. Final thing in the news, malaria parasites are getting natural progression within the United States, especially in Florida and Texas. So residents, if you're traveling to specific areas in Florida and Texas, according to the CDC, please take the appropriate cautions, because if you come back to the state of Massachusetts with malaria, you will have the opportunity, nay, the pleasure, to spread it with mosquitoes. So please take the appropriate precautions as we travel to Florida and Texas.
All right, thank you. I'm going to tag on for one moment around the well piece. I did not follow our newly discussed administrative procedure for going through town hall. I did in fact reach directly out to the Littleton Water Department regarding the potential for testing discounts, even outside of any potential well regulation, simply having that as a resource for our residents testing their water. I provided them with a list of what the model regulation was requesting or suggesting for testing, and they were going to talk to their vendor and see if there's what their price point could be as part of the Littleton community for numbers. I've not gotten that back yet. As soon as I do, I will share it with the group, but that was one of the things that we had a take home for last one. It's out there and it's in process. So once we get some numbers, again, we'll help guide our actions. And even if, again, whatever the outcome of well regulation, potentially having that simply as a resource for our residents would be a good thing if that's a possibility, and that we can get that out there to folks, that whether it's a requirement or not, testing your water is a good idea from time to time. And here's a way of doing it at a potentially decreased cost if that can come to fruition. So I will share as it comes forward. So, all right. Any other member input or correspondence? I think Matt had one. Yep. Go ahead, Matt.
Just to follow up from earlier. So should I launch the request to town administrator about trash hauler regs, or should we hold off on that and ask them to focus on the plastic bag ban? Or is there a third priority that we should change? I'm seeing twos.
No, both.
Oh, both. Okay.
I think Kevin had 3 fingers up though, so I want to know what's number 3.
Both.
The stable permit process to get that activated through the website, so stables can go and create their records in OpenGov, and we can issue them permits through OpenGov.
So how does the board feel about do we ask for all of these things and put town administrator in a position to say, well, I got to figure out which one do you guys want first? Because they can't do all 3 at the same time. It's not humanly possible. So
may I address the board?
Of course, Brenda, always.
Okay. So I was not present for the meeting with the town administrator. And so I'm just hearing about the updates. So I'm assuming everything now needs to go through the town administrator. But I wanted to give you an update in reference to the plastic bag ban. So that is going forward. I have spoken to town clerk Diane Corey. I have notified LCTV in reference to having the flyer posted, on as an ad. Kevin, I haven't addressed you yet, but maybe to do a PSA for the trash. I'm sorry, I'm getting them mixed up. Trash haulers and the bag ban. So maybe a PSA for the bag ban. So I am working on that. So we're going to go forward with that as of August 1st. That's the effective date. We do have a list that I already have for all of the I don't want to say realtors, but the retailers here in town. So we're going to go forward with that. So that is in process. I just have not actually had a chance to email everyone because I spoke with Diane and LCTV. I also reached out to Liz with COA to see if we could piggyback on their mailing in August to see if we could put that in their newsletter that goes out. If not, we do have the intern that's here and myself that we could stuff the envelopes as well with that flyer to go out. So that is going forward.
Okay, that is awesome. No, thank you very much, Brenda. So as far as like the flyers and all those things, were those generated by town administrator, town council? Just curious of kind of where they...
Well, that's been the town flyer actually has been put into place. I want to say maybe the flyer 6 months ago. And if I'm not mistaken, the building commissioner at the time, Ed Mullen, had given me that flyer to send out. I believe it was voted on, I want to say November 1st. Don't quote me on that. But that's scheduled to go forward in July, so that the community will be notified before August 1st when it goes into effect.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And just so you know that, yes, big items are going to go through town hall. I hope it is okay with you, again, that we will still have our communication of, adding things to the agenda and agenda approvals and those things.
Mm-hmm.
Those don't necessarily need to go through the town administrator's office of, please add this to our agenda.
Right.
I'm hoping you're okay if we can keep that direct back and forth, because I don't think that needs to go all the way up and all the way back for every time we want to add something to an agenda, or is this ready to go out? I think I'm hoping that you'll accept that is that is reasonable communication piece. It does not need to go up to the top. Figuring out how we're going to do stable permits, we're not going to dump that one on your desk and go figure it out, because that's going to be not that you're not more than capable of figuring it out, but that's going to be a bigger ask and more people involved than just you. So that's going to kind of be a bigger one that would probably go through town resource as opposed to an agenda item kind of piece.
Okay, so I've done them since last year, so that will continue the process. If anything, I work with Nancy to do them online and maybe have the permits paid instead of giving me the checks. Maybe we can do the process online on the back end, so people can apply for those permits online. If not, they fill out a form, they come to me, they give me the check, and I put it through OpenGov.
And that's a good example of where I absolutely appreciate your willingness to take that on. But that's one where, as soon as it becomes something where it's definitely multiple people's workloads, if I feel like we have to be running the prioritization through the top so that this group can say, this is the next thing to be done, hand it off to town administrator, and they can make sure it's coordinated. Because I wouldn't want Nancy and IT to hear one request from Brenda and a separate request from town administrator for two different things, because that starts to create the confusion. I think if you want to continue using the pre-existing process, splendid. But if there's some sort of change, like building it in OpenGov, which is of course what we want, I think that's where it has to come back to here. So this group, and that's why I asked this group specifically, we can't ask for all of the things at all at once. So would we rather have the next energy for us be focused on trash hauler regs or stable permits or portable toilets? We're going to work on that one because we have the regulation. But you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
I would lean towards trash hauler because we passed the regulation
I would too.
last winter and formally passed them last winter.
I agree.
What's the next one? It's a bigger one probably than stable permits, but I feel like it's more important and pertinent because we kind of do have a stable permitting process that works.
Right.
At least.
So what you're talking about stable permits is the stable as in put horses in and have that type of, got it. Okay.
Yes.
Versus stable as in consistent, ready to go, sort of kind of stable.
Opposed to unstable permits. Just go to Jim.
Sorry. I was like, wait a second. You're using stable in the same sentence to mean two different things for having fun.
Brenda, a quick question regarding stable permits. So we have an existing process, even if it's on paper and then entered into OpenGov. As part of that process, is the animal control officer doing inspections before the permits are issued? Jim, have you do like the manure plan as part of the permitting process? I'm just, again, that whole piece of stables are kind of weird that it's not going in and inspecting a restaurant. That's one player going, I've got an application or a renewal. I go in, do my job. Everything looks awesome. I sign off. We're all happy, but we have multiple players who have to we have administrative, we've got public health, and we've got animal health, all kind of playing into that mix for stables. I'm just kind of curious from a process flow, how that's working. And for Brenda, as kind of the admin who's kind of processing them now, how's that working out and what the process is, if you can share.
So kind of two components of it, if you will. So your animal control officer also does probably the barn book. It's one of those positions where you as a board nominate and the state appoints. So I believe that animal inspector is the term, I think, that you nominate and they appoint each year. If somebody goes in and their job really is more animal health,
Right.
Whereas the stable permit is more public health nuisances and making sure that manure's not running down the street, you're not having flies and odor nuisances and whatnot. And so the general law that talks about stable licenses allows boards to make reasonable regulations, if they will, for stable sizes and drainage and manure management. So your process is a very simple one. And then again, it's one of these things. When I came to town 17 years ago, there was this form. People kind of put on there what their manure management plan was. Seemed reasonable. We issued the permit. I think I've had one complaint in town, and the person kind of rescinded it because when I called to say, hey, what was the complaint? Where can I note it? Complaint just kind of fell apart. I don't know if it was somebody working it up. I don't know what it was. But so again, that's a good thing that we haven't had a lot of complaints. So that's how I would kind of handle it. I look at those forms. A lot of times these days, manure management is that person gets a dumpster and the dumpster's hauled off. I'm amazed at how many dumpsters get used for manure. Because I issue a lot of work with the town of Harvard, issuing a lot of stable permits, and that's unless you have a big piece of property where you're able to actually do some composting or kind of work it into your most of people having it hauled away. So that's kind of the division. Animal control deals with, the animal inspector, animal control officer. In this case here, I think Phyllis is both your animal control and animal inspector. She's looking more for animal health as the inspector and animal control for those complaints about dog bites and whatnot. Now, when it comes to rabies, that's the Board of Health piece of it. And we kind of share that. I think she gets the calls and complaints. Occasionally we get, if somebody's got a bat in their house. The best example I can give you is if you have a bat and it's in your bedroom and you wake up and you can't be sure that it didn't come into contact with you, generally the Department of Public Health wants the bat down at the state lab to test. And so she does some of that. We do some of that facilitation to make sure that whatever animal it is gets down to the state lab. So I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of went all around.
No, that's okay. So so I come in, I'm going to have my stable, and here's my paperwork, and here's my check. And Brenda says, great, that's awesome. And she sends a copy to Jim and a copy to animal inspector, who then go do their pieces and come back and say, hey, I went and inspected. Yep, I went and inspected the plan for manure looks great. And I went and inspected, and it looks appropriate for when the animals are healthy and they're taking care of them appropriately and the space is adequate and all that great stuff. And Brenda says, thank you so much. I've got my check boxes filled in, permits issued, everyone's happy. Is that kind of the process?
I've never really gone out and inspected. I've looked at just the permit.
The plans.
Yeah, I mean, if we get somebody who is looking for a stable permit for, I don't know, they've got 10 horses and it's on an 8,000 square foot lot, I'll probably go out and take a look because I suspect we'll get complaints.
Right, and that information is put in Viewpoint as well. So when they come with the application, they do have to put down their manure management plan, as Jim stated, and we take the fees, we put that online, and Nancy and I are actually going to work together to see if this year we can go live where they can pay online rather than coming into, into the office to fill out the form and just give me a check. So we're trying to move to that process where it can be put online on their end. Fill out the application where it's a fillable form and then pay the $25 fee. And then that goes into my weekly reporting and things like that. And when I do my turnovers to the accounting office as well.
Oh, yeah. All right. No, so that's awesome. So, I mean, certainly we are working towards upgrading to OpenGov for that process, but it's in place. The process is in place and it seems to be working, and Jim's seeing, make sure the manure plan looks good. Animal inspector is making sure our animals are healthy. So I think that while important, I would not say that's necessarily a priority. Where trash haulers right now, we have a regulation, but we don't really necessarily have a process at this time.
I agree that would be maybe a priority with the trash haulers.
Okay, no, awesome. I certainly agree. I think I'm seeing heads bouncing. So yeah, I think the board in general agrees that that should be our first priority to share with town administrator of how we can operationalize the trash hauler regs. So we need to really come up with we have the regulation of what is required for a permit and the timelines. We need to, I hate saying it's been so long since we instituted our trash hauler regs. I have not looked at them again before tonight. What the inspection process is. I certainly know they need labels for vehicles, and they have to have a contracted plan of where they dispose of it. It's licensed and all that good stuff. So I'm not sure if that would be a similar process to Stables, where they apply, here's who we are, here's our business license, here's all our information, here's where we operate out of, here's where we dispose of, and it's licensed. If that's a paperwork across Jim's desk to go, I've heard of them. Yep, they're in business. Yep, the place where they dump is a licensed place to dump. That seems pretty reasonable. And that's the extent, unless there's a complaint, or if we need more than that.
I guess I'd have to take a look at the regs just to get a sense
I have to go back and look as well.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that as we bring it to town administrator, again, it's always easier if you can bring a bit of a plan with them rather than simply going, here's our regs, make it happen. That's a harder ask. So I just want to make sure that we kind of have a little bit of a framework that we can provide town administrator. So again, a build an open gov if we can. And
I'll review and draft up what I see as the high level project plan to get it going.
That'd be great. Thank you, Matt. Yep. And then we can get that to town administrator, because I agree. I think plastic bags, town's all over it, and that's awesome. So that's great. We'll figure out enforcement if it ever gets to enforcement. Hopefully everyone is happy and reasonable and goes, oh, this is how it is. We have paper or we don't have anything. Super easy and not a big deal. Stables in progress, but we have a process that's functional. So yeah, no, Matt, if you could do that, that would be great. We can share it and get it to town administrator so that can hopefully be in place and the process started sooner rather than later. That'd be great. Any other member comments, concerns, or correspondence? Seeing none. Jim, as always, thank you for all your help tonight. I know we threw a bunch of stuff at you. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to your report for the inspection for 37 Dogwood, and your feedback and thoughts on the waiver request when it comes through, that, of your impression of when you did your walkthrough. So we'll see how that goes forward, if it goes forward, if we see that request. So if no one has anything, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to conclude our meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
I have two motions to adjourn. We'll count that as a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Muted.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Thank you, sir. Kevin Davis. I was looking down at my list. I didn't look up. Like, really quiet. Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Gina Fratelloni.
Gina Fratelloni, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
Chair votes yes. The June 28th, 2023 Board of Health meeting for the town of Littleton is in recess. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amber. Pleasure having you here tonight. Brenda, as always, thanks for being here. Jim, thank you again very, very much for your help.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Bye-bye.